Wonderful. Well, we come to our first speaker. Jen Gustetic has been, she was actually one of the first people to agree to speak, and new ideas need friends often, and she was quite the friend to make on this way. So Jen is the Assistant Director for Open Innovation at the White House, Office of Science and Technology. She is, I think, the only rocket scientist that's actually speaking. So when you say it takes a rocket scientist, we brought one, so point of order. She is responsible for scaling the use of open innovation, approaches like competitions, prizes, things of that nature that we're seeing more and more across the United States. She's designed and helped design all of these at the national level. She was described by Popular Mechanics in 2014 as vivacious with an aerospace engineering degree and a master's degree in technology policy from MIT, but that she uses her brains, her wicked networking skills to increase grassroots participation in these far-ranging missions. In the process, she's really broken down some walls to really hit on maybe perhaps the most important theme of this event, and that's why we asked her to speak first, which is collaboration, is getting the right folks together to build good faith, trust, and then an agenda together around solving a problem. And so without further ado, I just want to introduce Jen Gustetic. Jen, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me. It was awesome to hear two of the first speakers talking about challenge-driven methods in the energy sector already. So the Sunshot Catalyst program that I'll talk a little bit more about later, as well as the Clean Energy Business Plan competition. Jen Garson, are you here yet? From Department of Energy, has been working on that for quite a while, and we're excited to see that there's a new partner selected for that to keep it moving forward. But challenges are really a unique tool for government and for other sectors to incentivize progress towards goals without specifying the pathway to get towards that solution, to allow kind of new innovative approaches into the pipeline. So what does Assistant Director for Open Innovation do? Open innovation in the context of my job means two things, essentially. It's trying to scale the use of two sets of tools for the federal government. So prizes and challenges on one hand, which essentially state a goal, have a financial incentive or other incentive tied to it. We say that there are 4 Gs associated with what motivates people to participate in a prize competition: gold, guts, good, and glory. So sometimes it's money, sometimes it's other things. And citizen science and crowdsourcing. So when we look at the ability for individual members of the public to contribute to data collection, data processing, annotation of imagery, a variety of different types of things that individual PIs and scientists couldn't possibly do that whole workload alone. They typically don't get paid for those work. It's usually on a volunteer basis. But both of these tools, what they have in common is that they allow individual members of the public and entrepreneurs to get involved in problem solving in discrete ways where those doors may have been closed to them before. And so in the US federal government, we've been trying to scale the use of these tools and been lead experimenters over the last 6 or so years. So talked a little bit about why you even do open innovation in my opening remarks, but one of the fundamental kind of principles that drives the use of open innovation for many organizations is Joy's Law, that no matter who you work for, smarter people likely work for someone else as well, and you can't possibly employ all of the smart people in the world at your one company or in your one organization. It's just not going to happen. So how do you tap into that expertise? How do you tap into smarts that may be in your domain, but also out of discipline in an on-demand way when you don't have them as a salaried employee within your company? That's one of the benefits that open innovation provides. It gives you a vehicle to be able to tap into other experts, individuals, and entrepreneurs. But prize competitions are not new. They're newly in vogue. They've been used a lot more over the last decade or so since the Zpryme Prize was announced in the late 90s. Who's heard of the Zpryme Prize? Who's heard of Richard Branson? So Richard Branson created a company called Virgin Galactic, whose technology was based on the winning solution out of the Zpryme Prize that was won in 2004. before it was a $10 million suborbital space transportation challenge that was conducted by the Prize Foundation, inspired largely by this prize, the Ortiz Prize, which was announced in 1919. Who's heard of the Ortiz Prize? Who's heard of Charles Lindbergh? So Charles Lindbergh won the Ortiz Prize in 1929. Most people remember Charles Lindbergh, guts and glory. They don't remember the fact that he did what he did in response to a prize competition that was called the Ortiz Prize. There was a $25,000 prize competition for the first transatlantic flight from New York to Paris or vice versa. Many people died attempting to accomplish that prize competition. It was actually open for 5 years and no one competed for the first 5 years because the technology wasn't quite there yet, before they re-announced it 5 years after no one enrolled, and he competed and won. And people remember him for the task, for the accomplishment, not necessarily the structure of the prize. They are remarkably effective, these tactics at bringing new people to the table. So back in 2008, when NASA, so I'm detailed to the White House from NASA, where I was prior to being in this role. Back in 2008, we experimented with a variety of open innovation challenges to see if they worked for NASA problems. I mean, because like that's rocket science and climate science. And could you really involve individual members of the public in trying to innovate in these particular problem areas? How would you even identify what parts of the problem you engage these people in? So we did some pilots in 2008 to determine whether or not we really found that we were getting breakthrough ideas, inventions, and innovations actually through those types of techniques before NASA invested significantly more in those types of tools. Well, in 8 separate challenges in this pilot that were run in 2008, we did a survey of the nearly 3,000 participants that participated through that set of challenges, which amounted to about $200,000, so less than a single SBIR. That those 3,000 people that participated, over 80% of them said that they'd never responded to any NASA request for proposal or thought they could have ever worked with NASA before. And this was a unique vehicle, a unique avenue that let them access, gave them that access to the agency. And we awarded winners in all but one of those particular prizes. The one that we didn't get a winner for was a laundry system in space challenge, trying to think about new ways to do laundry in a zero-gravity environment. And it was 2 system level. So we found out in that particular challenge that oftentimes when you think about the problem at too high of a system level, it may not be further or decomposed well enough to actually get different disciplines into the mix as well and make it more of a math problem and take it out of the language of particular disciplines that keep people out when they see language that they just don't understand. And so we learned from that. We learned from several of our competitions and all the future ones. So these are also, prizes and challenges are a tool that the administration has really supported. So these are not activities that have only been done under the Obama administration. NASA's Centennial Challenges program actually started in 2005. DOE has been doing prizes since the mid-2000s. DARPA did the Autonomous Vehicle Challenge, a very famous prize competition, also in the 2000s. And so many of these prize competitions were piloted and started, the really high-impact ones, in the early 2000s. But the Obama administration decided to put some weight behind trying to scale the use of these tools, recognizing that they were unique pay-for-performance tools that the federal government has. And the federal government doesn't have many pay-for-performance tools. So wanted to try to scale the use of these tools, both in strategy documents as well as working with Congress to pass bipartisan legislation in 2010 called the America Competes Act to authorize all federal agencies to conduct prize competitions starting in 2010. Since that law was passed, that bipartisan legislation was passed in 2010, over 400 prize competitions have been conducted by the federal government. And that number is a little low, but it's over $70 million has been spent through this funding channel as well. And Challengesgov, which is the single one-stop shop for all government prizes. So just like there's a grants.gov for all federal grants, and there's a FedBizOps for all federal contracts, Challenge.gov is the place that you go if you're curious what challenges are open today. You're a member of the public or an entrepreneur and you want to get involved. And they're becoming a tool that is now much more used by government in thinking through how you engage individual members of the public and entrepreneurs better in the portfolio of tools that you're using to address the needs of a particular program. And so we're not saying prizes and challenges replace contracts or grants, but they augment them. They can help to accelerate, and I'll give you a couple examples later, accelerate parts of the portfolio and bring new people into that portfolio that you would not have been able to tap otherwise through the traditional kind of tool set. So there's a few kind of findings that I'm going to run through really quickly from the 2014 report to Congress. Part of the requirement from the 2010 legislation is that every year OSTP has to send a report to Congress on all the prizes that federal agencies conducted over the last year. So the good news of getting more prizes is that we see growth in the use of this tool. It's a great story, more great examples, getting more ambitious. And Mike's prize is a super ambitious example of taking a number of different design features and doing something super cool. And we see agencies becoming more ambitious and sophisticated in the way that they're thinking about using these tools. Bad news is I have to write that report, and it's about 350 pages. Front material is only about 20 pages, so we really tried hard with the executive summary to make it more accessible to folks. But I'm going to run through some of the high-level kind of findings from the types of prizes we saw conducted in 2014. So on the entrepreneurship and startup side, one of the most interesting models that we saw in 2014 was a challenge that was actually conducted in partnership between the NIH, so the National Institutes of Health, that's within Health and Human Services, and the Center for Advancing Innovation, CAI, which is a nonprofit organization. And so in this particular prize competition, NIH had identified that they, knew, and most federal agencies have this problem, I know DOE has this problem, that they have lots of inventions, they patented lots of things, there are fees associated with maintaining those patents, and for some of those patents, they're not being leveraged, they're not being licensed, we're not seeing commercial technologies actually reaching the marketplace from those new inventions that are coming out of our labs. And so how is it that you get more attention on these high potential inventions that have been patented by the US government to create new commercial products? Well, they came up with one idea through this Breast Cancer Startup Challenge, and now they're on their follow-up challenge with this one that's a Neuro Startup Challenge, so it's more focused on kind of neurological health startup and startups and products. In this particular prize competition, CII worked with NIH to identify 10 high potential but underutilized inventions within their patent portfolio, and they structured a startup competition around those inventions to try to encourage the creation of new startups, to create products in the commercial marketplace in places that had been historically underinvested in, and we saw less products than even the marketplace needed. And so this one was completely funded, actually the prizes, by the Avon Foundation. So Avon Foundation put up about $250,000 grant to support this competition, and 11 startups that were each awarded, I can't see the number, it's something like $20,000 each. To participate in this competition. It was a business plan competition as well, but focused much more on the intellectual property that NIH owned. This was, again, less than the amount of a single SBIR, and they got 13 or 11 startups out of it. And SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research Grant, which is a tool that the federal government uses to invest in companies as well. We see a lot of the challenges that are being conducted by the federal government actually focusing on the algorithm, data, software, and analytics side. Over a third of the challenges focus in that area. That's largely because there's really rich communities of solvers that exist in the data science and coding communities. So one particular vendor there, Topcoder, has a online kind of community of over 400,000 developers, coders, data scientists in their community that globally from around the world that you can surge in on software-related problems. So instead of going to your one software developer that you have on staff, you can actually crowdsource that task to a number of different software developers in the Topcoder community that that may have a particular expertise and requirements, or a particular coding language, or unique skills in order to tap into dozens of people to solve your problem as opposed to just one engineer on staff. this is one of the things that I find so interesting about Mike's program. So Mike with the Sunshot Catalyst program, not only were they trying to encourage new startups in the area of addressing soft costs for the solar industry, leveraging data and software as part of the solution, like part of the product that these startups are using in order to address those soft costs. But they recognized that a lot of the teams, a lot of these companies that were going to be competing were not necessarily also software developers. So they had a great business plan, they really knew the energy industry, but not necessarily the most efficient software developers. So one of the things that they offered through this prize competition was for the top 20 teams, for the top 20 teams, they offered the $20,000 credit to Top Coder to essentially crowdsource additional software capability for their startup. So augmented their team through a credit to crowdsource solutions. 20 teams were developing, either augmenting the current solution that they had or building entirely new solutions in parallel on this platform in order to actually build the thing that they demoed at Demo Day. So in this particular case, they had crowdsourcing as part of a broader challenge. This is a very sophisticated application. This is like PhD level thinking of developing prizes. So we're very proud of Mike and love the model that they did here. And they got incredible value out of this competition. So this is some analysis that that Mike did comparing this to a traditional three-phase SBIR STTR investment that the Department of Energy would have done, the types of turnaround and investment in not only the amount of value, the amount of teams, but the speed that they were able to conduct this activity at was remarkable compared to the traditional tools that DOE has. One final example that I'll give you on this kind of software and algorithm space is just to really drive home kind of what this means in software and algorithm capability is CMS, Center for Medicaid Services. They process a lot of provider enrollment stuff at the state level every year. They were looking to upgrade their provider enrollment modules that they provide to the states. Long story short, traditionally, they would have done that through a contract where they would have gone out to an IT services vendor to bid for that. They estimate it would have cost them $7 million to build that module. They actually built the entire module in open source using a Top Coder approach, which was 120 micro contests it followed the software development lifecycle, but it was 120 micro contests that built into this product, this module that cost them one sixth of what it would have cost them through the traditional contracting approach, and they got something open source. Also, agencies are becoming a lot more ambitious in their application of these tools. So as of 4 years ago, HHS had not done one competition. They dipped their toe in the water with data competitions, with hackathons, imagine what you could do if you mashed up these data sets together. I call those the gateway drugs of prizes because you figure out how to kind of get it through the process at your agency, but then learn once you figured out process, how to get more ambitious prizes out of your agency, up to the point where last year they announced a $20 million prize. This is the biggest prize that has ever come out of the federal government, to develop new point-of-care diagnostics for antimicrobial resistant bacteria. Which is a huge issue, but they're going to use a prize competition approach to try to develop new technologies in that area. There are many roles that the federal government can play, and this comes to the point that that Drew was saying about convening and collaborating and setting agendas. The U.S. federal government and any organization can play a number of different roles in coordinating these types of performance-driven, incentive-based ways of trying to accelerate progress towards goals. You can be the host, meaning you identify the problem, you fund the purse, you identify the rules, you run it, you market it, you judge it, and you award it. So you do it all yourself. You get like the great marketing that comes with like, yeah, we're innovative, we're doing challenges. You can host it. You can also coordinate. So a great example of agenda setting here was when the U.S. federal government identifying that nutrient pollution was a significant problem in the country, creating things like algal blooms. Nutrient pollution is phosphorus and nitrogen runoff essentially into waterways that create these growths in water that make it unsafe to drink. It's bad news, and we don't have a great way to sense and monitor those levels in our nation's waterways because we don't have low-cost sensors, and B, we don't really know how to clean it up. So we convened a whole group of stakeholders in this area to create an agenda-setting document, basically, that specified goals, meaningful goals, ambitious but achievable goals in the space of nutrient pollution, in order to accelerate progress towards solving this problem. And it ended up being that 3 separate prizes have spurned out of that activity, only one of which is a government-led prize. Tulane University is leading one for soil sensors. The U.S. government, mostly NOAA and EPA, is leading one for water sensors. And then the Everglades Foundation out of Florida is leading one for cleanup. All coordinating, they get on bi-weekly calls together and coordinate their challenges, hence the power of agenda setting together with a broader group. And the agenda setting activity was coordinated by the federal government, even though they only took on one of the follow-on activities. I'll give you 2 very quick, powerful examples and then I'm done. So this is a particular really cool prize in the energy space right now. It's called the Wave Energy Prize. You guys may have heard of this one. It is a $2.25 million prize competition. That's the end prize purse. That's looking to create and rethink new ways of using wave energy conversion devices that could actually be economically feasible for use, specifically in the upper Northwest. And so they just announced this prize a couple months ago. I think it's 92 teams registered for this technology development and demonstration prize. That is huge. While I was at NASA, I think maybe the biggest prize we ever had was 25 teams registering. 92 is huge, and in wave energy conversion technologies. And from all over the world and the country, teams registering. They had to submit essentially a design and some sort of economic justification for what they thought the scale-up of their technology would look like. And the top 20 teams will be selected after the next phase to move on to 1/50th scale testing. They'll be provided access to testing facilities across the country to do 1/50th scale testing for these particular technologies. And then the top ones out of that will move into, up to 10, will move into 1/20th scale testing at Mask Basin, Carderock, which is the premier facility for testing these types of technologies in the US. All the testing is provided for free to the teams, which is almost as much of a value, if not more value, than the actual prize purse at the end. And then there's up to 3 awards for teams that are able to exceed the target requirements for this particular technology development and demonstration prize competition. So this is about demonstrating new approaches to wave energy conversion, and this is a DOE prize that is super innovative and exciting as well. The final one that I'll leave you with is another innovative partnership for a prize competition. After the wake of Hurricane Sandy, and faced with rebuilding a lot of public spaces in the New York, New Jersey, kind of Connecticut region, the Hurricane Sandy Task Force partnered with HUD, Housing and Urban Development, as well as a few local nonprofits in that region to think about how it is that we might rethink public infrastructure with coastal resilience and community sustainability in mind. Those are not traditionally the grant applications for public infrastructure that come to HUD just in normal due course. These come from design firms that are designing based on kind of their closed wall ways of thinking, not necessarily through community engagement, nor with explicit goals like resilience to coastal flooding, which will happen increasingly, in mind. And so HUD partnered with the Rockefeller Foundation and a couple local foundations for $2 million in prize money that would be made available to 10 teams to develop designs for rethinking public space in that region in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. World-class design teams, ones that never, architectural firms, that never, landscape architecture firms, that never proposed to HUD, proposed to this prize. And they got 10 world-class teams that developed $1 million proposals for essentially $200,000 in seed funds plus technical assistance for the community meetings that HUD required these folks to do in the development of their designs. And the really, really impactful part of this particular challenge is that the designs were so good and so bought into at the community level that 6 out of those 10 finalists ended up getting up to $1 billion, almost $1 billion, that's a B, not an M, $1 billion of HUD traditional grant funding in order to start the build on those projects in the affected region. And so when you think of a prize being applied in this case, it's a front-end tool to get better quality proposals in a pipeline that already exists, that you're not traditionally getting these partners playing or this level of quality of ideas that meet these particular priorities in the pipeline. So this is very ambitious. The prior one was ambitious. There's a lot of ambition in the DOE world and in the energy world that we could be thinking about as well for prize competitions, convening partnerships and bringing new people to the table. And this is a great mechanism to do that. Not the only mechanism. I'll be the first one to say that prizes are not right for every problem. You can't just apply them to any problem, but they can be really transformative to the right kind of problem. So thank you for your time.